lovies. It's David McGee here with the penultimate episode of Little Did You Know here on YouTube. Yes, in just a couple of weeks' time, everything moves exclusively to Patreon, so subscribers can join us there at the end of the show. You know all about that. And if you're not a subscriber, here's the link. There it is. It enables you to become one of us, and I believe it's so cheap and well worth it as well. Now, my guest on this penultimate edition here on YouTube is my first bona fide pop star. Oh yes. And you just heard him chortle. He's more than that though, because, and this is going to come up in the show, whenever over the past few years I go to an incredibly strange film, the chances are he's in the row in front. And I want to know why that is. This is all going to come up. And we're also, of course, going to talk about his group, so-called. It wasn't a group at all, really. And the name of the group. Now here we have it, you see, because there is a connection between the name of the group, I believe, and what I've just been discussing. The group was S Express, and now you'll know that my guest is the very wonderful Mark Moore. Look,
hello.
There he is.
Lovely to be here, David.
Oh, Mark, I'm thrilled. Skinny. Thank you for saying yes to me.
Who could say no?
Lovely. Now, so many things I've learned about you, Mark, but for starters, are you okay with being asked really naive questions?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I do love 80s music, I really do, but I know nothing about the music business. Maybe you can tell me more about it.
The music business?
Oh, I know nothing about the music business at all.
Oh, the music business has changed. The music business is on its knees, grovelling now, because, you know, when I was making music, people bought records. They bought physical records, but now it's all streamed on tap for free. It's changed everything. So music now is something you make so you can sell the gig or the t-shirt, or it's a very different game.
Can musicians still make money?
Yes,
oh,
musicians can still make money. It may not be as easy to buy 12 mansions like someone in Led Zeppelin, but they can still make money. But they have to have a clothing range.
Yes.
They have to have, do their Instagram and endorse products on their Instagram, etc. It's very different. Like I say, music is just an advert for all the other stuff that they're getting up to. That's a bit cynical, actually, but kind of
true. As I said, Mark, I've learned so much about you over the past few weeks because I love doing my research, but I didn't know, for example, you are half South Korean. Now, I don't remember reading about that in Smash Hits. Have I forgotten?
Yeah, it was mentioned occasionally.
Was
it? Yeah, my mother was from South Korea. She kind of was one of the first Koreans to come over after the Korean War. Her rooms were bugged by MI5. They thought she might be a communist spy. I could write a whole book just about my mother.
Maybe you might one day.
Yeah.
And this is a sweeping statement, but is it true? You had a unhappy childhood.
Do you know, I guess it was unhappy. But at the same time, it's really exciting and really character forming. My mother had a breakdown. My mother was incredibly successful as a businesswoman, dealing in properties, got divorced from my dad. Everything started to fall apart. The business started to fall apart. She had a breakdown. She ended up in hospital. I was homeless with my brother. We were in a kids' home, and we were put in a special boarding school.
What's special about it?
It's called Wolverstone Hall School, and it was for London kids. Some of them might have come from broken homes. It was a grammar school. You had to pass a test, but it was an experiment to see what would happen if these kids who couldn't afford Eton,
Yes.
but had the capacity to be at Eton, what would happen if they were put in a public, a school like that?
Did the experiment work?
I think it did.
A few people whose names we might know today also went to that school, didn't they?
Yeah. There was Martin Offiah, the rugby player. There's various people from bands, Ben Volpeliere from Curiously Killed the Cat.
Yes.
A couple of members of Mars, Colourbox. I'm going to leave off so many people, so maybe I should just shut up. But there's a lot of,
Why do you think that was? Yes, why did they go there?
I think because suddenly we had a safe space and we had, 3 meals a day, whereas before I didn't know if I was going to get 3 meals a day. I'd be lucky if I got one.
Like so many of my guests on this show, was music an escape for you?
Totally. It was, I loved that boarding school until I discovered punk rock. And then I realised there was a world out there that wanted me as much as I wanted it. And I started going to punk gigs, and suddenly the school became a prison. It was a boarding school. I had to go back to Ipswich, Suffolk, Suffolk near Ipswich. And it was keeping me away from the gigs in London.
Not only the gigs, but also Malcolm McLaren and Vivienne Westwood's notorious shop in the King's Road in Chelsea.
Yes, the dictionaries, yeah.
Again, so many of my guests did used to hang out there. You were very young, weren't you? What were you doing there?
I was 15, a bored teenager, as they say. We just parade up and down the King's Road. Sometimes poncing 10p's. Got a spare 10p, mate, so I can get the bus home. I'd make a fortune. I'd make at least 10 quid. So, in those days, a gig was like maybe one or 2 quid to get into. So you could get into the gig, buy a t-shirt. You were rich. Anyway, so Seditionaries was there. That was the place to be.
Yeah.
Terrifying going in the first time. Jordan, who must read her book, Defying Gravity.
I've mentioned it a couple of times on this show. I could not put it down.
She was the shop girl with this huge bouffant and hairdo and this eye makeup, which became the look of punk, and she's still incredible. She's an amazing woman. And she took me under her wing, and she'd take me to lunch after shutting up the shop, take me to lunch with her and Vivienne Westwood. And, I'd just hang out in the shop and just, felt accepted and felt like a grown-up. People talked to me like I was grown up rather than like a kid.
Have you been back to the shop lately?
No.
I only mentioned this because I have. I went this year. And do you know why? It was because I read that the man behind Thunderclap Newman had done Vivienne's electrical work.
Oh.
So I just went in there because his lights are still there. Do you remember Thunderclap Newman? You know about the music business.
Yeah, I can remember, vaguely.
Well, I went in and I wasn't really interested in Vivienne's t-shirts at £250 each, so I was just looking at the ceiling, because that's where his lights still are. And the cashier was a bit worried. What are you doing here? Can we move from Chelsea in West London, one groovy place, to another, and that's Soho?
Yeah.
Did you hear about Soho while you were patrolling the King's Road?
No, I never heard about Soho, but I would frequent Soho. Originally because in the school holidays, my dad had remarried, so I couldn't stay with him. So me and my brother were put in various places, including the bed and breakfast in Belsize Park, given money for Kentucky Fried Chicken to survive. And I would spend my Kentucky Fried Chicken money going to the West End cinemas, just seeing whatever film was showing. I escaped into movies. This is before I discovered punk and music. So I would just wander around Soho, going from movie to movie. One would finish, I'd come out, go to another one. Child prices in the West End wasn't too bad. And then I discovered all these little kind of sex shops up the alleyways and stuff like that. And I remember somehow being drawn to this one, which had all these kind of like gay men's magazines. And I shouldn't go on really, because I don't know.
I think I
all
know the
gets a bit
one.
disturbing.
Oh, that's what we want. And I think I know the shop you're talking about, and I think it's still there. I think it's in Rumley's Street.
Rumley Street.
Yes, and I've just forgotten the name of it, but it is still there. It's one of the few shops that wasn't owned by Paul Raymond.
Well, it's still a pawn shop.
Yes, it is.
I'm convinced it's not there anymore.
Shall I take you back there?
Yes, we're going to
Let's have a day in Soho.
Yeah.
Was the Blitz Club nearby?
The Blitz was in Covent Garden.
Were you a Blitz kid?
I was a Blitz kid.
No.
Yes, I was. Well, no, actually, I would never call myself a Blitz kid, but I went to the Blitz Club. I didn't go there from the beginning. I went there maybe 8 months on from been running for about 8 months, and I remember going there with a gang of friends. We all decided to go in one by one because we knew Steve Strange wouldn't let a gang in, you know.
Yeah.
So we went one by one, and one by one each of my friends got turned away
Because they weren't wearing the right
they
clothes?
Looked amazing.
Huh?
They looked fantastic,
But?
and I didn't look as fantastic, to be honest.
But you got in.
But I guess I looked kind of cute, and I got in. Steve
Exotic?
A little bit exotic. I look more post-punk, you know, kind of a bit more James Dean gone post-punk, with the quiff. And
Yes.
sort of, yeah.
What sort of music were they playing?
Oh, all kinds of wonderful electronic music, from Kraftwerk to Human League, and Visage had just started making records, which was Steve Strange's band, so they were appearing. I think that's right. It's hard to remember the timeline, but yeah.
I think you're right.
And obviously lots of David Bowie.
Yes.
It was great. It's very snooty though. And I remember, you know, you got the nice ones who would be just really lovely, and then the snooty ones who were just like, do we talk to this person? Are they in or are they out? So yeah, it was funny. I do remember being quite amused by it all.
Round about this time, I mean, there's a link to Kraftwerk. So, house and techno is making appearances. Now, there have been claims made that you introduced house and techno to the British Isles. Now, did you make any of those claims yourself?
Well, I can't deny it. But yeah, I was amongst the first in the UK to be playing house music and techno from Chicago and Detroit at a club night, mainly the Asylum at Heaven, which turned into Pyramid. And then we started like literally playing whole nights of it, still mixing it up with other things like New Order, Pet Shop Boys, you know, other electronic things. So it wasn't just one thing all night. Although at one point I did start to play house music all night long before anyone used to do that. And a lot of my friends were like, this is your fault, once it became house music all night long everywhere. And that wasn't my intention. But that
was just music you liked.
It was just music I loved, which wasn't getting enough airplay. I think the house music all night long, which took over from the 90s onwards, happened more because of the acid house explosion, thanks to clubs like Shum, which I guess DJ'd at, Danny Rampling and Jenny Rampling's club. And, you know, Future and Spectrum, which is Paul Oakenfold's club, DJ'd there too.
So what's the link?
Oh, and the Hacienda, of course, the northern clubs as well.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
But what's the link between going to clubs and becoming a DJ?
What's the link?
Yes, how did it happen?
I would frequent the Mud Club, Philip Salon's first club.
We've got to talk about the Mud Club.
Yeah, Philip Salon's an amazing character. You'll see him there in the early pictures of the Punks, the Bromley contingent, made up of Susie Sue and Billy Idol and Philip Salon and Sue Catwoman. Anyway, he was a prototype punk, he was a prototype new romantic, although he hates being labelled as either of those. because he always just did his own thing, and he's still at it now.
Yes.
So he won't give up. It's great.
Was it because of him or Tasty Tim that
Tasty Tim.
It was him.
Tasty Tim was DJing upstairs. Jay Strongman was DJing downstairs at the Subway Club, which was a gay club in Leicester Square.
Oh.
Lots of terrible rumours about the toilets in that place, which I won't go into.
Mostly true.
I'm glad we have an eyewitness report. And then, so upstairs, Tim didn't want to do the whole night. He had to go away one week, asked Philip if I could do it. Philip rang me up every night before saying, "You better not fuck up my club." No pressure. And on the night I did it, everyone went insanely crazy. They were jumping up and down, they were screaming. So Philip was like, "Yep, you can DJ with Tasty Tim."
How did you know you could be a DJ? Had you practiced in your bedroom with 2 decks?
Never. I had a really cheap, one of those cheap, I don't know what those hi-fi systems are called, where it's all the cassettes included in on it.
Yes.
And terrible. I didn't have anything decent at all for ages.
But you took to it like a duck to water.
Yeah. And then me and Tasty Tim, Philip Salon, you'd do once every 2 or 3 months, he'd do a big party at Heaven on a Sunday. And me and Tim would do upstairs in the Star Bar, whatever it was called. And everyone went crazy. And the Heaven staff, the management saw that. They said, "Okay, we want you to DJ at Heaven upstairs." So we started DJing upstairs. Then more people were going mad upstairs than on the main floor, so we got promoted to the main floor.
That's how it worked.
And this was all within 6 months of me starting DJing.
I know.
Yeah, it's crazy.
We've got to talk about a theme from S Express. I mean, obviously.
I don't know what that is.
Well, look, let me remind you of a man that we have to mention, Pascal Gabriel, because it wouldn't have happened without him, would it?
It would have happened without him.
Why? Tell me.
It would have happened because I was hanging out at Rhythm King Records, which was part of Mute Records at that point in time. And I was going in there saying, "Why don't you sign this record?" And the Beatmasters and the Cookie Crew, and that would go top 10. "Why don't you sign Taffy, I Love My Radio?" That would go top 10. "Sign Renegade Soundwave, sign this, sign that." So I got them all their first hits.
You had your finger on the pulse.
Yeah. So, and then they said, Mark, you've got us all these hits. Can we give you some money? And I'm like, "Yeah, give me some money. That would be great." And they said, "What else can we do for you?" And then I said, "I've got all these ideas for a record." And they said, "Put it on a cassette." And I did. It didn't make much sense to them. I wanted to sample the intro from Rolls Royce. And I had all these other samples I wanted to put on it. And they were like, "Well, listen, we trust you. We don't quite understand what's going on in your head. We need to put you with someone who knows their way around the studio." So that was Pascal Gabriel. So it would have happened without Pascal Gabriel, but to be honest, it would not have been as good without Pascal Gabriel.
So they were samples that you wanted to use, and he had the technical nous.
Yes, he had the technical nous.
Okay.
And we got on so well, me and Pascal, that we had the same musical interests, and we were on the same wavelength, and we ended up just jamming and making up bass lines. And I was like, "I want to put in this vocal bit, like it's S Express," and we did 2 records, that one and Superfly Guy, and the B-sides, and it was great. So
I'm going to go back now to 1988 when I was watching you on Top of the Pops. So I was about 40, and I wouldn't have had any idea what sampling was. I mean, I thought that this was just you and a real group who had written this song and were performing it. I didn't know that there was this system whereby you could join together other bits from other records. Do you think I was alone in that?
Possibly you were.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think.
Everyone.
No. Sorry, possibly you weren't. Possibly you weren't alone in that. I think the majority of people didn't get it. Yeah. But the thing is,
how did you know about sampling?
Well, I knew about sampling from things like David Byrne and Brian Eno's "My Life in the Bush of Ghosts," and then there was like early sampling on things like people started experimenting with sampling, but it was very basic in those days. You didn't have much memory on the machines, so Colorbox were doing it. Even Big Audio Dynamite, Mick Jones's band after he left the Clash, were doing a few film, snippets from films, etc. The Jams were doing it. The Justified Ancients of Mew Mew, who became the KLF.
True.
Lots of people were dabbling. It wasn't anything new, but the main thing was hip hop. Hip hop was sampling James Brown breakbeats, looping them, rapping over the top, and that was the blueprint for my ideas from S Express.
That was a big influence on you.
Yeah, hip hop was the main influence, and that was, I thought, I want to do this, but do it with disco rather than with rare groove, funk, soul. Do it with disco. So it was kind of like hip hop gone wrong, S Express.
But this was a major development. Tell me about samples, Mark. I mean, I know from other interviews that you don't actually like to mention all the tracks that you borrowed, but tell me this one thing.
I don't mind mentioning them.
Now?
I mean, Karen Finley, she was a performance artist from New York who would stuff yams up her nether regions, got banned from the ICA, Institute of Cultural Arts. Not by the ICA, but by the powers that be. Yes. She was amazing. She did all these filthy records with her. That's her saying, drop that ghetto blaster.
That's her.
And on the 12-inch saying, suck me off, suck me off, suck me off.
But that's not in the theme from S Express that we know.
That's not on the 7-inch, which is the radio version.
Okay,
yeah,
right.
That's the only concession we made to commerciality, taking that bit out.
Tell me, did you pay for all the samples?
Yes, they were all cleared and stuff.
Right.
People didn't know what it was then. They were like, you want what? I'll just take it.
Have it. But once you paid for everything, was there any money left for Mark Moore?
Yes, there was.
That was going to be my big question in this episode. Did you actually make any money out of that record? Because those were the days when quite often pop stars didn't make any money. All the money went to their managers.
I know. You see, I never had a manager, which I don't know was a mistake or really sensible. But yes, I didn't have to pay for a manager. And I mean, yes, I was able to have 3 meals a day.
Good. But you didn't have a real group. S Express.
They were a real group. They were real holograms.
So, okay, they weren't just your mates miming to other people's voices from years ago and pretending, like you, to play instruments.
Some of those voices were them.
So you've got S Express.
Yes.
So that was a new recording.
Yeah.
But everybody else on Top of the Pops, were they your clubbing mates?
They're my clubbing mates, yeah. Basically, I thought this is going to be really boring if it's just me running around promoting this record by myself. Pascal didn't want to be in the band anymore. He was just like, I'd rather be a producer, I'd rather be behind the sines. At first he got into it, he dressed up for the back of the record sleeve, etc. But then I was like, fair enough, he doesn't want to do it. So, I always had the idea that even then, when Pascal was going to be part of it, that it would be my mates as well and make it look like a group. Mainly influenced by the Jackson 5 cartoon that we used to see. And Sly and the Family Stone. And then as I made more records, there was more vocals, more things to do and less samples.
We're going to have to take a break there, Mark. We're going to have a look at a trailer for a Peccadillo release, and this one is called Monsoon, and it's the second feature film from a man called Hong Kao. And as you may know from a previous episode of this show, he used to work for Peccadillo Pictures, and then he went off and started making his own films.
Amazing.
It's true. Have a look at this and then join us again in a couple of minutes.
It's been a long time. 30 years.
If I see you in the street, I cannot recognize you. Where are you staying?
Taodian, District 2.
You should visit your old home.
Yeah, I'm going to.
You look like your picture. Thank God.
Went to where we used to live. I felt like a tourist. I hardly recognize this country anymore. remember growing up in London. Every Vietnamese person that I met lost a family member here.
Yeah, it took a great deal out of us, too. Generation forgotten, country divided.
I had no idea that we were leaving. I went to sleep one night, and when I woke up, I was on a boat, drifted for days. My mother passed about a year ago now.
Did your parents ever come back to Vietnam?
Never.
Must be very painful for them not to come back.
Where will you scatter the ashes?
We're returning them home.
Why has it been so long for you to return?
So did you find what you wanted in Hanoi?
Midirios, this is David McGillivray. I'm here with my special guest, pop star Mark Moore. And you've just been looking at a trailer for a film called Monsoon. And that, as you saw, is about a man who goes back to Vietnam after many years and falls in love. And that's available on peccadillopod.com. Mark, just before the break, we were talking about the theme from S-Express. It did rather well in the charts. You may have forgotten that it got to number 1.
Yes.
Was that a surprise?
Yes and no. It wasn't made to be, I didn't think it was going to be, when I had the ideas in my head, that it was going to be a chart hit. But then it suddenly appeared like, people kept talking as if it could be a big hit and expecting it to be so. And it was all a bit like, oh God, no, my plan was to be a cult band for 3 years and then to sell out and become huge, and so it ruined everything.
Well, we're going to have to flash through your career and all your other hits, Mark, because basically we get to the next stage in your career. I mean, it's basically S-Express is over by about, 1992?
Something like that, yeah.
Why?
I got bored of the merry-go-round of studio and then photo session interviews and radio appearances, TV appearances, just on and on and on. And I was having a great time as a DJ, and I just thought, I'm not enjoying this. Should I carry it on? And I thought, I'm going to go back to DJing and just see what happens. Yeah.
You mentioned the merry-go-round there, Mark. Did the merry-go-round include appearing in a David Bowie video?
That was before I was doing S-Express. That was when I was about 17, I think. I was...
You were in Blue Jean then?
Yeah. You can't see me in it though.
I was going to say, I've looked very carefully.
I've looked carefully. I don't think I'm in that. No, in those days, I was, trying to make ends meet. Didn't have a proper job. No, I was DJing then. That's right. I was DJing then. But to make money, I would go and gate crash certain films and videos, dance around all day, which is what I did in the David Bowie video, and then expect to get paid afterwards. When I went to get paid at the David Bowie video, they said, "Where's your sheet?" And I'm like, "I don't have a sheet." They went, "Well, you're not getting paid." And luckily David Bowie was walking past just at that moment. I went, "David, darling, they're not going to pay me." And he came over and went, "Oh, just give him the money."
It's who you know.
Yeah.
Have you been an extra in a lot of films?
Yes. The first time I was an extra was for Breaking Glass, starring Hazel O'Connor, which was fantastic. I got, they were spotting people in clubs, and the Music Machine I got spotted in. They asked, "Would you like to be an extra?" They were also going to the Blitz and getting people from there, because she goes from punk to kind of blitzy.
Can we spot you in any of these films?
If you freeze frame. You probably can.
Good.
But I'm on the back of the album cover.
Oh.
There's a good shot. And I was also in the promo stills. You can see me. I'll show it to you later.
Oh, yes, please.
Yeah. I gate crashed Sid and Nancy as well, and they liked me so much that they kept me on for quite a few scenes.
Really?
If you freeze frame the boat party of the Sex Pistols, you can clearly see me in it. Oh yes, Breaking Glass. If you freeze frame it in the riot scene, you can see me, and someone's just got stabbed, and you can see me laughing because I'm having so much fun. But thank God they didn't show up in the film. Completely wrong for the film.
I would have thought so. We just moved back in time there, but we're now going to come back to where we left off, which is you've decided that you prefer DJing to doing all this nonsense promoting your records.
Yes.
And then
So common.
you'd had enough. And then subsequently, you've done an enormous amount of remixing. So here comes another really naive question then, Mark. So what happens when you remix something? Do they, whoever they are, give you all the separate tracks?
Yes.
Oh, okay, from a record, and you put them in a different order?
Yeah, you could say
Kind
that.
of?
No, but there's a lot more to it than that. It's almost like you're renovating the house. You strip everything out, and then you choose the bits that you want to keep in the house. So you put those in, but you're kind of building a new interior.
How interesting. Now, obviously you were born to do this as well, because it's all about instinct, isn't it?
I guess, yeah. Yeah.
And this has continued to the present day.
Yes.
Do you enjoy that as much as DJing?
It goes in phases. I think as soon as I do something for too long, I long to do something else.
Like
so,
me.
Yeah. So it goes in phases. Now, I might even get the band together again. Who knows? Who knows?
Oh, yes, please. When you say the band, I mean, who do they consist of, really, apart from you?
Holograms.
Holograms still. Well, if ABBA can do it, why not S-Express?
There's a thing that someone showed me on I think it's on YouTube, where I've been interviewed in the 90s, late 90s, and they said, will you ever reform S-Express? And I said, I will only reform S-Express if ABBA reform.
Oh, no.
Yes, and they
Now
showed me that clip.
To do it.
I feel like I have to do it.
Yes, please. Now, we were talking about doing other things, and here's something that you did do, maybe you still do, I can't remember, but we've in fact worked together only in the sense that we both wrote for a weekly gay magazine called QX.
QX magazine. I wrote a column with Princess Julia.
You did.
Yeah.
And I was writing mostly historical pieces, but I was Hayden Bridge in those days.
Oh right, yeah, you wrote great pieces.
Oh, thank you very much indeed. Do you want to know where that name comes from?
Yeah.
It's a railway station in Northumberland. There we are. Now you know. Is QX still going?
Yeah. Isn't it? I don't know what's happened after lockdown. It was going...
Might just be
before
online
library,
now.
like everything else.
Let's move on to something I talked about in the introduction. This is a quote from you. You like stuff you can't find on Netflix. I'm talking about these incredibly strange films.
Yeah.
So, you've loved them forever, and I periodically see you at venues like, is it still going, the Horse Hospital?
Oh, yes.
Remember that?
Yeah. Billy Chainsaw's night.
Billy Chainsaw's night at the Horse Hospital. It was wonderful.
He's amazing, Billy.
He is.
He's from the punk days as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what a great career as well. Worked for the aforementioned Paul Raymond.
Oh, yes. And his art is great. I have some of his art.
Now we're going to get onto art in just a few more minutes. But first of all, I want to talk about your favourite films. So they're not orthodox, are they?
I think maybe they're not orthodox, but some of them have been claimed by
They become cultish.
They become cult favourites. Like Suspiria, I saw about 6 times when it came out. It's probably one of the first X films I could get into. It blew my mind.
It was something different.
Yeah, it just blew my mind, and it was in loud stereo in the West End, and it was just like mind-blowing.
It was. It sounded and it looked extraordinary.
But like I said, I'd frequent any movie, and I just remember coming across these things like George Romero's The Crazies, you know, well, obviously Night of the Living Dead first, then The Crazies, weird things like Dennis Hopper's Tracks, and
you have
Shivers.
Shivers
David
and
Cronenberg, and they just blew my mind.
And you mentioned Jodorowsky as well in the past.
Which I didn't see for ages until I went to New York. You couldn't see it for a while. And I managed to rent a copy of a video in Kim's Videos
Like
New York.
we all did, yes.
And watched it on a tiny TV screen. And it still blew my mind. So there you go, the power of cinema, the power of Jodorowsky.
It's true. He's still with us.
Yeah.
Nice. I'm going to move back to S Express because I was told that there's a film connection.
Mm-hmm.
Where did the name S Express come from?
Do you know something? It's not an exciting story. I was influenced by things like Brooklyn Express and BT Express, which were these funk bands from the 70s. So yeah, I just thought it'd be funny to call it S Express. And people would go, what does the S stand for?
Yeah.
And I'd be like, sampling. So it's not a very exciting story, to be honest.
Do you know what, Mark? That's not the story I heard.
What did you hear?
Okay, so for decades, I have believed Alan Jones's story. Alan Jones has been on this show. You know he runs Fright Fest. But back in the old days, he was involved with a magazine called Shock Express.
Yes.
And he said to me, Alan's going to hate this.
Yeah.
He said, oh, that's where Mark Moore got the idea for S Express from.
I'm trying to think when Shock Express started.
Long time ago, before I was born.
Obviously, I knew Alan from hanging out in Forbidden Planet from
of course.
Back in the original.
He used to work there.
Yeah, and he also worked for Vivian Westwood and Malcolm McLaren in Sex before it became
Also
Traditionaries.
true, yes.
So I loved hanging out in Forbidden Planet. I'd pick, Alan Jones's brain about new films and stuff, and and then we ended up living near each other in Magdalene.
You did.
But I'd go to all these film festivals, Shock Around the Clock, and
You did.
And I remember putting the Shock Express fanzine in one of my videos, but no, I didn't discover it till afterwards. So I'm sorry, Alan. That's not what happened. But I love that story. It's probably a better story. So let's stick to that one. Yeah.
Okay, now I've been watching you on TV, Mark. Okay, so the show's called The 80s, Music's Greatest Decade.
Yeah.
Now that's what I believe too.
Yeah.
But I've had a mutual friend of ours on this show.
Yeah.
Okay, another DJ called Martin Green.
Yeah.
So I put this to him.
Yeah.
I said, the 80s, music's greatest decade.
Yeah.
He doesn't agree.
Yeah, I know he doesn't agree. We've discussed this. But
Do you know why?
He was talking about all these great things came out in the 70s.
Correct.
Like Ken Russell, etc., who are amazing directors, but they're not music. We're talking about music's greatest decade, not culture's greatest decade.
He thought the 70s and to a certain extent the 60s as well were more innovative.
Do you know something? You might as well say the 50s, because rock and roll comes from the 50s. So, I mean, if we're talking about innovative new things that happened, they certainly happened in the 80s. That's when, the whole blueprint for that 80s electro pop took off, obviously. Sure, Kraftwerk were doing it a few years before, but it was the 80s. It's considered that 80s sound. Hip hop took off in the 80s. House music, which is now heard everywhere in pop music, house music has taken over from rock and roll as the new pop music. Pop music used to be rock and roll based, rock based. Now it's house music. You can't get more innovative than that. Come on, it's taken over everything. For better or worse.
Let's take it up with Martin.
For better or worse, it's taken over everything. The 80s has been more influential in terms of what we're hearing now.
But on the whole,
musically,
but you and Martin are great mates,
yes,
aren't you? And you do have a lot in common. And what intrigued me is that he mentioned the fact that when he was a kid, he loved the theme tunes from children's TV episodes, and you did too.
Same here.
So he liked finger bobs.
I liked the Barry Gray stuff, Captain Scarlet, and Joe 90. One of my favourites was the Rupert the Bear theme, and I must admit,
we can sing it.
Well, let's not sing it, but you can sing it. But the thing is, I must admit,
Rupert the Bear. All right, that's enough.
You know what else? The woman who sang Rupert the Bear, Jackie Lee, also did another one of my favourite TV theme tunes on White Horses, which we always thought was about heroin. But it's not. It's about white horses. And she was amazing. They should do a compilation album of both her hits. But
did you ever play?
Yes, me and Tasty Tim would play those records at the Mud Club, and they'd be floor fillers. Both of them, Rupert the Bear on White Horses, Joe 90.
What do you make of that, Mark?
People wanted to relive their childhood at these clubs, and they would it was like a good trigger thing going off when they'd hear that music. And they'd be drunk, they'd be jumping around. It was, they'd probably be pogoing too.
A lot of this sort of mashup stuff happened at a club called Taboo, and apparently you and Martin used to go there.
Yeah,
but you didn't know each other in those days.
No, I didn't get to know him till Smashing. I think
Smashing was Martin's big club in the 90s.
Yeah, I didn't really know him, but I'd go to Taboo. I think when it opened, it was on a different night when I was DJing at Heaven Pyramid or Asylum, whatever it was then. So I could go quite easily, and then it moved to the same night. I think it was.
So that was it.
And so I could, if I was in the first half of the set, I could go down afterwards and frequent. And I enjoyed Taboo. It was great, and I loved Jeffrey Hinton's music there, and I loved the mayhem, and I loved that it was one of the first places where ecstasy came en masse to a club crowd. But what I didn't like about it was all these people who were probably considered rejects and freaks at school or whatever in the real world, who suddenly had this place where they could, be kind of like important, and I thought they would treat everyone else with respect, but they were vile to everyone. And I just thought, this is a shame, because now they've just turned into the bullies that they hated. It was a real shame. Not all of them are like that, obviously, but that's why I like the acid house thing in the early days, the second summer of love, when it all exploded. Yeah, maybe it was a little bit hippie, but it was like everyone was looking after each other, and everyone was kind of being nice to each other and helping each other out. And, I just think when people stick together and do stuff together, things happen. And look what came out of all the acid house things, all the amazing kind of people like Chemical Brothers and da-da-da-da-da. And we're all DJing, with each other and at each other's clubs, etc.
I expect we're going to talk more about the second summer of love, and indeed drugs, in the Patreon part of the show, Mark. Are you available to just stick around so that we can do some special stuff for Patreon subscribers?
I will do it, but viewers, just say no.
I do want to mention this as well, kids. It was a phase we were going through, and we're not encouraging it.
And we're perfectly normal now.
Look at us. Look how far we've come. Mederios, we have to stop there. We are going to move on and talk about all kinds of stuff. What's going on up there?
Show a little bit of beautiful scenery.
It's a lovely day here in the park. Look,
God.
look, there've been some squirrels around here as well. But that's enough of that for now. Patreon subscribers, you can join us right now. You know where we are. And if you're not a subscriber, here's the link again. There it is. You can become a subscriber so easily. Join me again next week for the last episode, yes, here on YouTube. And my guest will be Tony Forsyth. Now, way back in the 80s, he was in a groundbreaking gay film called The Fruit Machine. Do you remember that one, Mark?
I do remember that, yes. Yeah.
Well, The Fruit Machine starred Tony Forsyth and Craig Charles's brother, Emile.
Yes.
I want to find out what's happened to both of them. So if you want to know that as well, will you join me next week?
I will.
Splendid. Until then, this is David McGee and my special guest, Mark Moore, saying, mwah. Bye.
Bye.